Hello, everyone, and welcome to our City of Hope presentation of Introduction to Clinical Trials. Myself, Kara Nolan, and my colleague Delilah Ortega are portfolio supervisors in the Clinical Trials Office. Our goal in this presentation is to provide you with information that will help you explain what a clinical trial is and how they work, know the different types of clinical trials, and identify resources for finding clinical trials in cancer. What is a clinical trial? It's a type of research study that tests how well new medical approaches work in people. These studies test new methods of screening, prevention, diagnosis, or treatment of a disease. And a clinical trial is a research study conducted in human beings with the goal of answering specific questions. Why are clinical trials important? So treatments we have today are based on what we've learned from clinical trials in the past. Everything from a common drug such as aspirin to Herceptin chemotherapy for breast cancer. People are living longer because of clinical trials. Clinical trials include improved quality of life for cancer patients and for new drugs and devices to be approved for use in the United States and most countries. Clinical trials are required to prove safety and efficacy. So what are the types of clinical trials? There are treatment trials, prevention, screening, supportive and palliative care, and natural history studies. So each type of trial is designed to answer a different research question and will help researchers learn things that will help people in the future. So treatment trials are generally looking at drugs, vaccines, new approaches to surgery or radiation therapy. Screening trials are looking at early detection, such as the prostate blood test or mammograms. Palliative studies looking to improve quality of life, prevent and treat as early as possible symptoms of the disease. And then natural history studies are looking at familial medical history, tissue, blood, etc., to help determine clues to help develop new treatments. So clinical trials have different phases. They start with preclinical studies, which usually start in the lab. We have phase 1 studies, which focus on safety. We have phase 2 studies that look at safety and dosing. Phase 3 studies that look at safety and efficacy. And then phase 4 studies, which is after FDA approval, look at post-marketing safety and efficacy. Each new phase of a trial builds on the information from the previous stage. So phase 1 trials may involve healthy volunteers and maybe the first time a investigational product is being tested in humans, what we call a first-in-human trial. For some diseases, the investigational product may not be safe in healthy volunteers, such as in cancer and chronic infectious diseases. Most phase 1 trials enroll between 15 to 30 volunteers, so they're usually pretty small, and they take several months to complete. And the goal of a phase 1 trial is to determine what dose is safe in humans. And in cancer, phase 1 trials for cancer therapy are different from trials of less toxic drugs. Often patients must have tried all approved therapies and may have already been on a phase 2 or another phase 1 study. And patients with many types of cancers can often participate in the same phase 1 trial. Approximately 70% of drugs move from phase 1 to the next phase. Phase 2 trials are primarily intended to demonstrate whether a new drug will provide any clinical benefit. A range of doses is sometimes used in order to find a dose that can be used in larger trials. The trials can be placebo-controlled, double-blind, or open-label, and they typically involve 50 to 200 patients and can take up to 12 to 24 months to complete. So the purpose of the phase 2 trial is to determine if the drug is effective for that particular disease or condition being evaluated. And as I stated, they often use a placebo, which is a substance or other intervention that has no therapeutic effect, and it's used as a control in testing new therapies, often referred to as a sugar pill. And approximately 33% of drugs in this phase move to the next phase 3. Phase 3 trials must have sufficient data from phase 2 studies to warrant moving on. And these usually include a large number of patients, provides an opportunity to observe side effects and possible interactions with other treatments, trials of a drug in patients using the dosage form and dose and the indication which the drug is intended to be marketed. So they'll evaluate the drug in real life conditions. They'll be conducted in several different hospitals and clinics around the country to ensure a wide range of operating conditions in a diverse population. They are usually randomized, double-blinded, and controlled. So that means usually if they're blinded, the double-blinded, that means the patient nor the physician knows what drug, if it's the drug or the placebo that the patient is taking. Or sometimes they can be open label where both the physician and the patient know. So these studies are going to compare the new treatment with the gold standard treatment and study different populations and different dosages. Typically anywhere from 300 to 3,000 patients are enrolled. It can take 1 to 4 years to complete. And on average, 25 to 30% of these drugs are able to move to the next phase. So phase 4 trials, that means the study has been approved by the FDA. And so these are post-marketing studies. So these studies are to monitor the long-term effectiveness of a drug. It's a means of collecting additional data. It's study the quality of life issues that may arise with these drugs, look at cost effectiveness, help define optimal use of the compound, and also may be mandated by the FDA if the sponsor has not decided to do it on its own. So sometimes the side effects of a drug may not become clear until more people have taken it over a longer period of time. And some drugs have actually been pulled from the market after phase 4 studies. For example, Vioxx, which was a drug to reduce inflammation and pain relief, was found to increase the risk of stroke and heart attack. And it was pulled from the market. It was on the market from 1999 to 2004, and the FDA determined it wasn't, the risks outweighed the benefit, so the drug was pulled.
Thank you, Kara, for that presentation. I will pick it up here at types of treatment trials in cancer. We have drug trials, we have immunotherapy and CAR-T, gene therapy, precision medicine, vaccines, devices for drug delivery or diagnosis, approaches to surgery or radiation therapy, combinations of treatments. Most cancer trials are treatment studies that involve people who have cancer. These trials test new treatments or new ways of using existing treatments and are designed to answer questions such as, what is a safe dose of the new treatment? How should the new treatment be given? Does the treatment help people with cancer live longer? Can the new treatment shrink tumors or prevent them from growing or spreading to new places in the body? What are the new treatment's side effects? Does the new treatment allow for better quality of life with fewer side effects? Does the new treatment help prevent the cancer from coming back once treatment is finished? Who allows a clinical trial to move forward? The Food and Drug Administration, otherwise known as the FDA, has the purpose to ensure the conduct of clinical trials. They approve testing of investigational product in patients, and upon completion of clinical trials, the FDA would review the data and determine if the product can be used outside of research for standard of care or conventional care. Next, we have the Institutional Review Board. The purpose of the board is to protect patients on the study. They ensure patients have sufficient information prior to the participation and continue to be informed throughout the duration of the study. Institutional committees, if applicable, such as assessing clinical rationale, radiation safety committees, and biosafety committees. And the institutional committees are only applicable if the study design requires such assessments. Who is participating in clinical trials is a really great question and something that we would like to bring to this group as it's important to the eventual outcomes of the clinical trials. The clinical trial population is really vast. 46,000 patients participated in treatment trials in 2019. and that's different types of treatment for diseases. Fewer than 1 in 20 adult cancer patients will enroll in a cancer clinical trial. When we look at the 46,000 patients, we see that about a little over 3,500 of those patients participated in oncology trials for the 3 new drugs that were approved in 2019. Now, at City of Hope, 25 to 35% of all patients enrolled on a clinical trial. The next topic is very important. It's making sure that we have equal representation on clinical trials. In 2019, the FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research showed that we had 48 novel drugs approved. In that data, we also saw that only 38% of the participants were women. 18% of those were Asian, and 5% or less were African American or Hispanic. This proves to be a difficult problem for our clinical trials community because we see a large underrepresentation of women and minorities in oncology trials. Why is it important for the clinical trial to represent a full spectrum of potential patients, you might ask yourself? The concern we have is that because people of different ages, races, and ethnicities might react differently to medical products, we wouldn't have the full information of how that drug would really interact with the underrepresented races. A great example of this is the recent COVID-19 vaccine studies, where we see that the majority of the population being affected are the minorities, African American and Hispanic populations. But if we use the numbers that we've seen previously, where 5 or less % of the population is participating in a clinical trial, we'll see that we really won't be able to get a full picture of how the COVID-19 vaccine would work on this underrepresented population. So it's really important that we get our underrepresented populations to participate in clinical trials. Our next topic is going to be what a patient needs to know when considering clinical trials. How do I participate in a clinical trial? It's really very simple. You can ask your provider if there are studies that would be a good fit for you. At the end of this presentation, there would be resources, websites, and tools that you will find that will help you find a study that is a right fit for you. Participation in clinical trials requires a discussion with your oncologist or provider to determine if the trial is right for you. And perhaps if there is already an FDA-approved therapy that would be a better course of action for your treatment. Every study has criteria for patients who can participate, meaning that there are certain things that you may or may not have that would make you eligible for the study. It would require additional visits and/or procedures to determine this eligibility and your ability to participate in the trial. Again, your caregiver may be able to help assess whether you qualify or perhaps refer you to another provider who can help determine the qualification for a clinical trial. What you should expect before you agree to participate in a clinical trial. You should be informed of the nature and purpose of the clinical trial that you're going to be participating in. Part of this is going to be the informed consent process, wherein you'll be given an explanation of the research-related procedures and any cost to you, as participating in a clinical trial does not mean that you will receive care that is free of cost. You'll be given a description of any discomforts or risks that you can expect, an explanation of benefits to you, disclosure of alternatives to their risks and benefits. You'll be informed of what can happen, meaning what complications can arise and what we can do about it. You'll be given an opportunity to ask questions, and we encourage you to ask questions. You'll be instructed that consent to participate can be withdrawn at any time. Participating in a clinical trial is voluntary. At any point throughout the process, you're able to withdraw your consent. You'll also be given a copy of the signed and dated document, and you'll be given an opportunity to voluntarily consent to participate without any elements of force, fraud, deceit, duress, coercion, or undue influence. What is expected of you if you decide to participate on a clinical trial? The importance of following the schedule of events is going to determine the success of your participation in the trial. We're going to want to make sure that you're able to come to all of the appointments for treatments, assessments, and procedures. We'll want to make sure we're able to report any symptoms, new or worsening, to your provider. We'll want to ask that you be compliant with study treatment and completion of diaries and questionnaires. We want to make sure that there's open communication of any questions or concerns about your participation. And again, make sure that you know that you're able to withdraw at any time, and that we would like to make sure that you discuss with your provider any concerns that you have throughout the process. How do you learn more about clinical trials? These would be a few slides with resources for you to further explore. Resources that are available to patients and caregivers are a clinical trial search related specifically to breast cancer, as we see in this first link. We also have free service provided by a nonprofit organization, as this next link provides for you. There is cancer.gov, which is sponsored and managed by the National Cancer Institute. So all cancer clinical trials that are going on across the nation would be found here. This is also a really great resource for helping understand what clinical trials are. You can also contact City of Hope Clinical Trials Navigator. We have nurses that are available to review what trials we have available and navigate through them at City of Hope. We encourage you, again, once you've found a clinical trial that you think you would like to participate in, to reach out to your provider to make sure that it's a trial that would fit you and your treatment needs. Other resources for patients and caregivers also include cancer and non-cancer networks. We have the National Institute of Health, which is the nih.gov that you'll see here. There is clinicaltrials.gov, and that would be anything related to a clinical trial regardless of the disease or drug. And there are other disease-specific services that can be found at cancer.net. We encourage you to look through these websites and resources to find, again, information related to a drug that you're interested in and discuss it further with your provider. Thank you so much for joining Karen Nolan and myself and the City of Hope staff for the Southern California Women's Cancer Conference. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to being able to serve you and our community.